The United Kingdom is prepared to seize Russian ships if they are seen damaging British submarines. London intends to respond as strongly as possible to any threat to ensure the protection of the state. This statement was made by the head of the British Defence Ministry, John Healey, on the ITV programme Good Morning Britain, Voice of America reports. The minister recalled how Finland seized the Eagle S tanker, which damaged the electricity cable between that country and Estonia, and said that the UK could act in a similar manner in the event of threats of sabotage against British cables. The head of the Defence Department also commented on the British Navy's escort of the Russian spy ship Yantar, which entered British waters again on January the 20th. In response, a British submarine surfaced near the ship, and a Royal Navy ship escorted the ship through the English Channel until it emerged into the North Sea. Commenting on the incident in Parliament, the minister said he had changed the Royal Navy's rules of engagement to allow the Royal Navy to get closer to the Russian vessel and better track its actions. According to the heads of the Ministry of Defence, Russia is dangerous but fundamentally weak. The UK is ready for the most decisive actions in response to any threat. I want to assure the House and the British people that any threat will be met with strength and determination, the minister stressed. The Russian embassy in London stated that the Russian Federation does not pose a threat to the underwater infrastructure of the United Kingdom or other NATO countries. However, Western countries, particularly those bordering the Baltic Sea, have recently faced increasingly aggressive Russian subversive activities, including through damage to undersea cables and power lines. In response, NATO recently announced a patrol mission in the Baltic Sea to prevent further sabotage of underwater communications after several incidents in recent months, likely involving vessels from the Russian Shadow Fleet as well as Chinese ships. Earlier reported that the UK, together with its allies, is stepping up response measures aimed at countering Russian ships and aircraft near NATO borders. A compromise between Ukraine and Russia, which Washington is now seeking, is impossible. There are no prerequisites for a peace agreement, and this means that Russian dictator Vladimir Putin will start raising the stakes. Russian analyst Anatoly Nesmian writes about this. The new US President Trump has already issued an ultimatum to Putin, demanding that he immediately stop the war against Ukraine. Otherwise, the American leader warned, Russia will face very tough sanctions pressure. Murid is confident that Russia will soon have to feel these sanctions since Putin is unable to end the aggression. Trump is a very decisive person, so the promised sanctions will definitely come, and such that they could become a systemic problem for the Russian economy, which is strained to the limit, wrote the RF blogger. After that, Putin will probably try to break the deadlock by raising the stakes. He is unable to turn the tide on the battlefield in Ukraine, which means he will try to attack a third country. According to Russian analysts, the threat looms over Moldova and the Baltic states. There are a number of problems with Moldova, but the main thing is that it is not a NATO member, and here it is important to go all in. The seizure of the Baltics is a defeat for NATO, since in the event of a blitzkrieg, NATO simply will not have time to respond. If, of course, Riga, Tallinn, Vilnius, in 3 days takes place, the Russian blogger writes. He stated that Putin has nothing left to lose, and this greatly increases the risks. A blitzkrieg, he believes, would create new opportunities for Putin. It would allow him to resolve the Ukraine issue within the framework of large-scale security negotiations with the West. Trump, Russian analyst believes, will freeze out from this story and suggests that Europe itself deal with the threat posed by Russia. If sanctions are introduced, the risk of a sharp escalation outside the Russian-Ukrainian conflict increases significantly, the Russian blogger stated.
Russian President Vladimir Putin on Friday seconded U.S. President Donald Trump's claim that he could have prevented the conflict in Ukraine if he were in office and said that Moscow is ready for talks with the U.S. on a broad range of issues. According to Associated Press, speaking in an interview with Russian state television, Putin hailed Trump as a clever and pragmatic man, focused on U.S. interests. "We always had a businesslike, pragmatic but also trusting relationship with the current U.S. president," Putin said. "I couldn't disagree with him that if he had been president, If they hadn't stolen victory from him in 2020, the crisis that emerged in Ukraine in 2022 could have been avoided, he added. Putin's statement marked his bluntest endorsement of Trump's claims that the 2020 presidential race that he lost was rigged. The Russian leader also echoed Trump's statements in which he repeatedly said that he wouldn't have allowed the conflict in Ukraine to start if he were in office. On Thursday, Trump told Fox News that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky should have made a deal with Putin to avoid the conflict. Putin emphasized on Friday that he's open for talks, but pointed to Zelensky's earlier decision to rule out any talks with Moscow. It is quite difficult to speak of serious negotiations given the ban on negotiations from the Ukrainian side, he said. Putin charged that sanctions against Russia introduced by Joe Biden's administration hurt U.S. interests, undermining the dollar's role in the global financial system.
Действительно, нам лучше встретиться, опираясь на реалии сегодняшнего дня, поговорить спокойно по всем тем направлениям, которые представляют интерес как для США, так и для России. Мы готовы. Но, повторяю, это прежде всего, конечно, зависит от решений и выбора действующей американской администрации. Например, подтачивание могущества самого доллара. С нынешним президентом США у меня всегда были деловые, исключительно деловые, но в то же время прагматические отношения и доверительные, я бы сказал. И я не могу не согласиться с ним в том, что если бы он был президентом, если бы у него в 2020 году не украли победу, то, может быть, и не было бы того кризиса на Украине, который возник в 2022 году. Пока этот декрет не отменен, говорить о том, что могут быть начаты и, самое главное, закончены должным образом эти переговоры, достаточно сложно. Какие-то предварительные наметки, конечно, можно сделать, но о серьезных переговорах, конечно, в условиях запрета с украинской стороны вести эти переговоры, конечно, в условиях этого запрета говорить о чем-то серьезном достаточно сложно. Мы слышим о возможности введения дополнительных санкций в отношении России. Я сомневаюсь, что он будет принимать такие решения, которые будут наносить вред самой американской экономике. Он человек не только умный, он прагматичный человек.